Apology is not accepted. Stop the plumbers. Cool. All right, we're back on deck. We're now considering agenda item D1, which is the Wairarapa Destination Management Plan Report. Do we have a mover to receive this report? Roll up and seconded Gary. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, the motion is carried. Well done, Jackie, you didn't raise your hand. Councillor, actually, you want to talk to this?
I've great pleasure in presenting this to council for your endorsement. This was funded from stat funding from the government. It's an important document as a document that can be used to particularly try and encourage funding from central government. There are a couple of things I just want to mention. The management plan is not a plan for Destination Wairarapa, it's a plan for the whole region, which is a really important thing. I think it's been a 12-month process to develop it, including region-wide consultation and research from Commonwealth Brunton, so to understanding visitor demand. Its intention is to grow the visitor economy and to understand what drives people into this wonderful part of the world. I think it's done an excellent job. The reason that we're being asked to endorse it, so to date, both Masterton and Carson have received and endorsed the plan. We've had a presentation and you've had an opportunity to discuss the plan itself, but it's here for any further questions. So the key thing is once it's endorsed, it can be agreed to come under the Wairarapa Economic Development Strategy, and so that we can open the door for stakeholders and tourism to start working collaboratively to identify funding and allocate responsibility to get the objectives achieved. So it's the start of a journey. And so essentially you're being asked to endorse this plan so that we have a Wairarapa view of destination management.
Yeah, we, if I can comment, we had a presentation to WEDS on this one. And far, but there was an interactive with one of the consultants who was actually at Hanmer at the time. And it was really interesting, the change of focus and the direction we got with regards to multi-tourism, as well as sustainable tourism, which were highlighted as, I was still thinking on the events, get people over sort of thing, and there's very much a focus that we need to be very, that's what the public are demanding now and in the future. So it was excellent. Any other comments?
Just in terms of some of the synergies here with the Wairarapa Economic Development, strategy that was, when was that? That was 2019, I think.
It's been ongoing, and so WEDS is now managing the output on that and working with Wellington NZ with regards to having a specific economic development plan for the Wairarapa instead of it being lumped to the Wellington region.
So the original strategy focused, had a lens focus on the Wairarapa though, and there are synergies between this document and what was previously produced.
So there's two parts to it though. You have Destination Wairarapa, which is separate from cultural WEDS,
right,
as you would say, and then you have the economic development drivers. Yeah. So they are still separate, but they will be co-sharing for sake of
obviously tourism. So
a key, absolutely, yeah. And it's a brilliant document. I've read through this and I think it's brilliant.
And on the WEDS itself, Colin, there'll be information coming to you probably around the end of June, around the refresh of the Wairarapa Economic Development Strategy that's been occurring, and sort of the arrangements to actually bring this plan and the WEDS plan to life.
Who chairs that now? Dame Margaret Mosley was.
Dame Margaret isn't anymore. She's retired.
Right.
And it's now Adrian Young Cooper, who's a South Warringah resident, chair of Auckland Transport, chair of Queenstown Airport,
ex-chair of Housing New Zealand,
very
good credentials. Thanks for that.
Oh, it's probably worthwhile mentioning it that Anna presented it for this, and she did say it's a living, breathing document.
Yes.
So obviously over time.
So just to correct, so it was a workshop prior to the start. It wasn't actually on the flower agenda. Yeah. So
Sorry,
it would be
you're
on the
right.
flower agenda and say, where's this? It's not- yeah, just-
And I just like to actually commend the work that Destination Wairarapa has done to put this document into place. I think that the consultants that they had were absolutely top class, and it shows because I think this is possibly one of the best documents that I've seen when it comes to looking forward into the future. And what the scope of our region looks like. It's really comprehensive and it covers all peoples, which I think is really important. So I just really wanted to absolutely commend them on this.
And
I'd agree with what Pip said. I think that it is commendable. The one question I had on page 69, which is defining the destination, which is the wee map of the area, they don't actually show Tora and White Rock on there. And I think that they are touristy areas that are growing for people going out there and for having holiday homes out in those two areas. We've got round to Cape Palliser, which I understand, but I just thought that those two areas, although they have communities there, they don't actually have towns, but they are a destination.
but we can certainly pass that on. And there was raised at the WEDS meeting last week, going, what's with that map? Because there are other bits and pieces on there. And I think that's that living document thing. So yeah, we'll pass that on. Excellent.
Can I just, sitting beside Pam, can I just say page 100 is a slight typo?
In the van.
Are you going to make us?
That's
Yes.
missed me off.
They
That's
just-
why I
okay,
read it.
In the last pair on the left-hand side, eight councillors, there's actually 9 councillors in South Wales. But Pam didn't pick it up.
Just look.
By the time I got to page 100, I was drawn out.
No, they were expecting something to happen to you.
We actually do read these reports.
Excellent. So do we have a mover to endorse the Wairarapa Destination Management Plan? Thank you, Colin. Seconded. Brenda, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, the motion is carried. Excellent. Now, action items report D2. So we have to jump way ahead. Do we have moving to receive the District Council action items report? Pam, seconded. Pip, well done. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. Right. Any questions on that?
Just a comment, poor Karen, she's not even started and she's already got items allocated.
Yeah, okay. 420, I see that council requested to provide more specifics on that. And that is, particularly if you remember the conversation we had about, and it's mainly forestry and the impact of forestry trucks on a very short period of time on our rural roads. That's what that question was about.
Yeah.
And whether there's some way that forestry can actually pay a bit more to help people the road.
So
It's gonna be more.
I did follow this one in the sense of just trying to clarify where's the appropriate place to, so this is very much a question for the rating review. And I actually have approached Wellington Regional Council to give us a sense of the scale of forestry operation and stages that's in. And I've had some preliminary information from, you were calling him David Boone from GWRC, so we can establish it is what the quantum of the issue is. But the appropriate place for this to be addressed would be as part of the rating review.
As part of that, could we also approach NZTA with regards to the impact of heavy traffic on roads? Because they would have more information than.
Well, you can talk to the ex-National Freight Director,
Nah.
who did high productivity motor vehicle
Yeah,
implementation.
no,
Yeah, okay, I can tell you all about that. But yeah.
I don't think we'd be impartial.
Yes.
So I believe this actually came up back when Hinakura was being looked at, because they knew that they, in the next couple of years, they're actually going to have a lot of heavy traffic going through there, which is why it was so important. And we said, well, it's not just going to be Hinakura. We actually need to know what's going on through our rural roads to ensure it. So when they're asking about what the clarification is, we're, as governance, wanting to stay ahead of these things to ensure that the roads are,
And the big one's actually going to be Ruakok.
Yeah.
The amount of forestry all the way through there to the national park is huge.
Creek is.
What I'm saying.
it's Stony Creek.
So I've requested information from GeoPass to get a scale of what forestry, exotic forestry.
Yeah, great.
It is actually going on logging, because the other complication, there's a lot of forestry now is carbon farming. So it's rotation, plantation forests as well.
Yeah,
So
that's the logging trucks.
so the problem is helping the problem actually is this.
Would you but just follow the media with what's happening in Wairau and Gisborne, and that they're bringing this through a rating review? And have discussed it, and I think that's where it fits.
So why
But we need to know what the scope is.
Oh, yeah, but that's all part of it.
Yeah.
So the mechanism here is the action is to direct that information into the rating.
Sorry.
I was just going to ask, I know it's action, but 78, we would done the river crossing. Have we got the final figure on what the costing was?
No, not yet. The early indication is, and please don't quote me, it looks like we're going to be under budget.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed.
Yep.
So yeah, we just get the final cost.
It would be great to get something under budget. Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Certainly would be.
Especially from Wellington Water.
And where are they at with the long-term
Yeah, absolutely.
look at that?
I'll have to.
I think there was a time frame
Yes, it was.
on that one, which is starting soon.
It was asked at one of those webinars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have to go back and look at what the time frame for exploration of a long-term solution.
Yep.
So they are working on it. I just don't know exactly what.
Yep.
the-
And when they really will get the finances for the actual cost of the bridge of the repairs.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We should know exactly what the,
When do you expect?
I was expecting a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So that ties in with the point that the action has, the item has been actioned, but it actually hasn't. Because on request part 6, it requests that these costs be advised. So maybe if we change it into a new action that we.
We'll just leave it open until.
Yeah, well, you know, just cut out number 6, it's been a separate action.
Okay.
Number 94, we'll be able to close off.
I was just about to say that. Thank you. I even had my hand up as a gentleman.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Jumped ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, too far. We've,
Can I just ask on 5.2, that's obviously under action now?
Which one?
Yes, yeah.
so we're expecting
Yes,
that.
so just to confirm that, and we'll report it back to council shortly.
Great, thank you.
Even if we need an extra meeting.
So can I also just add that item 550, which is provide financial information on council's commercial lease properties as service committees, that was actually provided to FAR
Yeah.
as part of fund, so it's actually been ancient. It was on the FAR, recent FAR.
And will it come to assets and services? No.
But it was a report of FAR, the voice model program.
Oh, right, gotcha.
Harry, could we add one into this regular updates on
We're
the?
trying to take them off.
Well, I know, but I've been asking, and it's very topical in the community board as well, and right through Greytown is the footpath crossing to the Five Rivers.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So, and I'm still waiting on that update to send back to the owners of Five Rivers.
So we're going to have an action item to provide an update on timings and costings of that particular.
On that.
And Harry, if you could send me the answer to that question I did ask, so I can let the owners know as well where we are.
Yeah, I will.
And I've got a question on 5.2, the council flats on West Street. Did that have to go back to the community board again, or
That item's still open because of the debate, the consultation on the men's shed bit of land. That's why that item,
Lumping it all together.
it's all lumped together. It was in the whole property.
Sorry, that's with regards to the council, the land on the pensioner flats.
Yeah.
So we have a workshop plan to look at the future of pensioner flats and the land associated with that.
No, this was withdrawing the consent for Harry to sell it if somebody made an offer.
Oh, we've already done that.
Yeah, but it's still open, but it's open because of the
So
other
maybe
thing in
some
there.
commentary would be useful.
And, through you, Mr Chair, item 640 can be closed. Because that's been addressed in today's meeting.
Yes, that's right.
There we are, we closed one there.
Good.
And we can close.
Which one was that, Brenda?
640.
640.
We can close 126 as well, which is clarification of funding.
Yeah.
We've actioned that, we're now moving forward with the extraordinary meeting.
Sorry, the other one, 551, this one, so this was set prior to when we started the webinars with Wellington Water. Yes, this is the, there are multiple opportunities to discuss with Wellington Water, costs, issues, those types of things. So
I think there's still two items with Wellington Water and Colin that we need to have. One is discussing at a governance level the budget overruns and how they're going to be managed in the future. And the second one is the having a more clear discussion on how the tenders panel works for the South Wairarapa. So there is still a couple of cost efficiency items.
Okay.
I'd quite like to.
We'd asked for governance.
Yes, we had.
Yeah.
Now, Philip, Philip, what's his name suggested that?
Bill, yeah.
John.
Philip Jones, Philip.
Yep.
739, how long, would this is the usual that this is taking a year and a half? That's the first one on there.
Yeah, look, actually, I chased that up with Russell, because he's on leave, and I asked him to kick that one along to go sure it's moving.
It's just, they were to check in on the 11th of 2021, and then they check in on the 4th, and then check in on the, in April, and then again in May, and it's just, what's going on?
Call from council officers where they get no response. That's
Yeah, but
It's not.
and we see that within our grants funding, when we're asking for, reports back on the funding. And there's a lot of council time when people just don't reply.
They see they've sent an email to them.
And I contacted them in the last few weeks to try and progress this matter, because I pushed it out.
And speaking about.
It's really creeping along, and it's,
I assume the Wards Line land has been settled and sold.
I think so.
Yes, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
There was an asset search.
Yeah.
Harry, could you potentially separate the Featherston wastewater and the water races into two separate items, because they're quite different?
Which number?
That is 552. And I would imagine that one would be easier to resolve than the other.
Oh, yes.
But the report will come as one report.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay at the moment. But if there's issues there, we can separate.
Once we get the report.
Just in terms of that one, Alex and Harry might be able to answer that. I know Stephen's working on a paper. Is that being presented at the next council meeting in terms of the water races and the Featherston wastewater?
So we'll have a workshop first.
The workshop, okay.
Go to that council, but we need your direction.
Yep, excellent, thank you.
Anything else? Now we'll move on then to the CEO update report, D3. Do we have a mover to receive the report? Ma'am, seconded Pip, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, motion is carried. Over to you, Harry.
Okay, so look, I'm going to speak to the overheads. If you've got a very high level summary to do with the changes. So if you could start, we'll start on page 132, which is a response to the governance working group report. So while you're finding that, so recall last council we reported on the feedback from the Department of Internal Affairs to the questions council had asked. Interestingly, I found out that we had something like 15 pages of reply, and most other councils only got 3.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure what was in the water, but most of the answers you'll recall were the steering group has been appointed to look at the issues of ownership, governance and accountability. Hasn't given their recommendations yet. We'll consider that was where we left the last briefing too. So the government has now considered the response from the governance working group, and so the highlights there, or the highlights, or the summary of that. So I'll just walk through this. This is on page 1 or 2. So the first concern, an overwhelming concern, was the ownership model and the protections to be provided for privatisation into the future. So the government has confirmed that public ownership of the 3 water assets will be managed through a shareholding. So every council will be given a share in the entity based on per 50,000 population. Now that's up to. So we will still get 1 share, even if we only have 12,000 people. So it's up to. So we will be given 1 share. The share modelling is, the model is literally an ownership in the entity. It doesn't confer any other rights like dividends from the company and so on. And so it's literally just an ownership to protect protect the public. There's also buried in the cabinet paper, which has just come through, which is, so the minister has released the cabinet paper where the cabinet considered the recommendations from the steering group that informed these decisions. That's where the detail is currently sitting. So they also undertook that if the entity could not dispose of any asset, and if there was any talk of privatisation that's going to be put into the law, that will require all councils to agree. Unanimous decision making by council. So under the present structure, you can't. It would, if for some reason people did want to privatise, the law will state you have to have 100% agreement from all councils for that to happen.
Until they change the law.
Yeah, so until they change it, but that's a different thing.
But that's actually quite.
And there's another one around, also requires 75% of the House to actually agree to that as well.
I've got to say, Harry, that's no protection whatsoever, given that the previous government had such a law in terms of the privatisation of state-owned assets, changed the law and then sold out shares. So, it's no protection whatsoever. It's smoke and mirrors.
So as much as the short of the sovereign conventions of Parliament,
yes,
they are putting as many buttresses into the law to make it very clear and set very high hurdles to any possibility of privatisation.
Well, that's their spin that it's high hurdles. It's just smoke and mirrors, and that's it.
So I think we will never ignore the fact that the government has the sovereign power to do what it likes. However, this is as good as we'll get.
So is there any liability attached to shareholders?
No. Thank you. And that goes to the heart of the balance sheet separation. It again puts into law the council's financial relationship between councils, and nor can councils be involved in the funding of the 3 water entities. And that comes to the critical thing about balance sheet separation as well. They can take what this is. Where you take it, I'm just giving you the information on what came. The second biggest concern was the governance and accountability model. So there's a number of entities that are established through the law. The first is a merit or competency-based board. So it means it is a board that is appointed based on the competence of directors, essentially, not necessarily on representation. So that's the first thing. The board, so it's expecting to operate in a commercial model, and the directors will be expected to manage, as competent, merit-based.
So they don't have the necessary skills.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
They're not government appointed.
No, so and that comes to the next point. So there are parts where the government can intervene or say, if say for example, so the process is the regional representation group can make, can currently in the appointment of the board. But there are fetters and checks or in the law to make sure that it is a competence for a merit-based. Okay. So it's still a regional representation group, and it's still between 12 and 14 people, but it allows the establishment of regional sub-advisory groups to be part of that. But remember, the powers of the regional body is literally at the level of the instruments that guide the organisation, not its operation.
So, Gary, can I ask a question? Is that regional representative group, are they paid?
I don't
We
know.
haven't got down to that.
I don't know.
I would assume so.
So that's another level of bureaucracy on top of this.
There's also in the recommendations was also that these groups are resourced and administered to actually carry out their functions, and that's put in.
How is that regional representational group actually appointed?
Currently, it's the entities and the members of the entity have to sort that out themselves. Remember, it's also got a 50-50 split with mana whenua. The legislation is very specific. It puts its definition in law about what constitutes mana whenua, and it does go down to the hapu level. So it's not just the significant iwi group. So, but again, the same model of sub-regional advisory things apply. But the key here is that the powers of the regional advisory group are to advise on the instruments that guide, like the statement of intent, the asset management plan, those types of documents. They're not, in fact, the law actually drops down, so thou shalt not interfere in the day-to-day.
Well, I think it's more important than that, and I ask the question and say, how is the regional representational group going to be made up of? And if they haven't worked that out, does it? And my question is, is it council elections for those, or is it public elections, or is it for the 6 or 7 iwi hapu representatives? Is that a public election, or is that a appointment by whatever, and so on? So that is quite critical to this whole.
No, it's definitely not a public election. It's not all those type. It is the council appointed. The councils have to sort out amongst the councils how that architecture is going to work.
Well, how's that going to be sorted out?
Yeah, these are all things that
it's hard enough to agree in Wellington Council alone, let alone with any other council.
Dig into the document, there's about 350 issues to be sorted out.
Yeah. If you go
we could talk all day about what's wrong with what hasn't been clarified.
But what I'm saying is it is in law, it actually steps that group right out of any operational decision making. It is literally at the role of the planning instruments that guide the board to deliver services.
Sorry, Harry, I'm just going to stop you there. Our purpose here is to actually listen to what Harry has to say. We don't shoot the messenger, but we just take on any concerns we may have and perhaps bring them up in another forum.
And so that's my next. So my next point is.
I like shooting the messenger.
Yeah. So my next point is, as I said, it's still 12 to 14. And actually, this overhead is incorrect. It's iwi hapu and hapu representatives, but it's not at all levels. But there will be an expectation that cultural understanding of all things Māori will be part of the governance mix of competence to bring to the board. And it also sets Te Mana o Te Wai as a key guiding principle. Now, sort of separation is that the Te Mana o Te Wai is around water quality. So it's not the management necessarily of the asset guided side itself. It's just recognising the important spiritual value of water to New Zealand and particularly to Māori. And so that's going to be enshrined as a guiding principle. And which is to strengthen the application of Te Tere o Te Waitaki. Okay, so let's move on. So the minister, the transition to the new entities is starting as we speak. And so there's a national transition unit that has been established and with a board to oversee the national transition unit. Heather Shotter, the chief executive from Palmerston, has been appointed to that position as director. And the board chair is Sir Brian Roach. Sir Brian Roach has experience in transitioning major organisations. He was actually the interim chair of New Zealand Transport Agency when it was created as a merger of Transfund Transit and the Land Transport Safety Authority. So a very experienced chair. And there have been subsequent appointments to other key roles, which so they're really building an A-team is the point here. And so there's the National Transition Unit has issued a 90-day plan, which I'm more than happy to send out to you, just to give you some implemented ideas that just arrived. And so it's all guns blazing in terms of so not waiting till the law is passed, I suppose is the key point here. But the other thing is the minister has made it very clear that she has cabinet support and that these reforms are going ahead. Okay, I think that's the key headline.
Can I comment then, Harry? You talk about the fact that these are, quite well-known and highly qualified people. If the entity doesn't have people of that level, then it's setting itself up to fail. So I would expect them to have the best of the best at the top. Yeah.
And you'll recall the government put aside 500 million in the budget for just this, so that they've actually appropriated to resource the transition. Now, these are only the transition, so this is not, so one of the key next steps would be, for instance, to start the process for selecting chief executives for each of the entities, and so forth and so forth and so forth.
There's nothing in the timeline about that says that. So there's just dearth of thing within the timeline they presented about when they're going to do the regional representational group and then the board and then the chief executives and all the stuff. So
we have a timeline.
There's an indicative timeline in this presentation. But let me just keep on.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It doesn't show anything about that.
Yeah. And so the transition units up and running. And as a region, we're all working together. We've employed Dougal List, who many of you will be well and truly aware of. He's acting as our information link connector, keeping information flowing to us, summarising. In fact, these are his overheads, which were presented to the combined council meeting. But they're very thorough. So the next steps, there are a number of data and information requests. So all sorts of stuff. At this point, we've said we're not in a position to provide data and information until you resource us to do so. And they're working on the technical and transition program, which is understanding of the assets and those types of things. But it is a huge change process. Lots of change process. Probably one of the biggest New Zealand's seen since the electricity reforms. Local Government New Zealand and staff are donkey deep where they're able to be released, because this is one of the hard things. Is, everyone's got a day job. There's no one floating around in this kind of sector that's just sitting on the wings to provide this. And remember, it's not just technical people. They need human resource specialists. They need IT specialists. They will need. Imagine what it would be like trying to stitch 67 databases into one common database for asset information and those types. It is highly complex.
It's a monumental task.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but just in terms of Local Government New Zealand and their involvement at this stage is quite critical to where you end up. But we also have another group that's a fraction group of that, for instance, that have signed up. Where do they sit at the moment in terms of lobbying for change or for getting the model right at the end of the day? We're not party to them, are we?
No, we're not. I think Masterton voted to be past that and then withdrew that.
Okay.
a final comment from their iwi representatives. But I'm not sure on that one. I think I heard that. The splinter group, I call it a splinter group. They don't like being called a splinter group, are still lobbying independently with letters and with statements.
How many councils in that?
13.
33.
Is it 33 now?
33.
So it's over half.
Yep.
Well, over half.
Well,
But again, the minister's made it really clear.
Yeah.
This is going.
So could we have not given a public statement as to where we stand on this in the council, and that really concerns me that, one, we have not had this discussion in public before, and two, we need to signal to our community where we stand as a council on this. And I think it's, we are running out of time to do this. Everybody knows where I stand on this. I've written a public thing on this, but I think as a council, we actually owe it to our community to say this is where we stand on this and put it out in a public letter so that the minister is fully aware of whether or not we support these proposals. Now, we haven't had an opportunity as a council to have that discussion. Are we going to have that opportunity?
So just to correct that, so last council meeting, you raised that point. And there were one of the councillors not here said actually we don't have all the information now to make that information. So there was the opportunity, and there's still an opportunity. And so this is the information. I'm just filling the gap, because remember at the time when it was there, all we had was a response from DIA saying it's all in the steering group. So you've now got the information from the steering group. So
I mean, we could wrap it. However, see, a lot of my opinion would be on the way the government is going to treat council assets, which for us is millions of dollars, and we still haven't had an answer on that one. So at the moment, as much as I'd like to make a statement, until there's more clarification on so many more areas. So whether this is a process for government to drip feed the information to stop us from having a definitive view, I'm not sure.
Well, and I accept that, Alex, but actually my point would be actually what they are doing is drip feeding it to us. And personally, I find this completely unacceptable. There are significant questions that we need answered, and they have not answered them. And why they're not answering them, I don't know. It could be that very reason. They haven't got the answers. So as I'm only talking for me personally, I have no confidence in the process that's been followed here at all, for a whole raft of reasons. And as an elected person in our council, in our community wants to know what we think of this as a council, and we should be saying at this point in time, you are failing in your duty to provide the information, and as a result, we do not support your decisions. I think that's a perfectly reasonable position.
I think we've been, certainly as a council, we've been very clear of our dissatisfaction and disgust with the process that's been under.
But we have not signalled it to government. 33 other councils have. We have not.
Look, I think there's a whole raft of reasons, but Alex put it in context before, that try and fix this aeroplane while it's flying. So there's all this information is being fed to us because they're making the decisions on the run.
So,
Hey, John.
Well, should we have confidence in that?
yes.
Or should we be signalling out our satisfaction?
But then you go to what Harry said. The minister has made it quite clear this is going to happen.
She might say that, but the public of New Zealand hasn't said this is going to happen yet. And we are just one of 33 councils, and we have quite a bit of sway with our community. If we as a council don't accept this, why should our general public? And surely they want leadership from us on this matter.
So does your stance is that they're unhappy with it, given that it's being done to us and it's been signalled that it will be done to us? What form do you want that statement? Yeah.
No, I'm more than happy to draft a letter if you want. You probably won't like my language.
But can I suggest I finish the presentation?
Yes.
Because there's a lot more in here, and then we can circle back to that conversation. Okay, so I was just going to the next step. So there is going to be numerous requests for information, data, those types of things. Again, we've said our position has been we can't do it unless you give some funding. and for the transition. So we are looking to the Department of Internal Affairs to provide resourcing to this council, so ratepayers do not have to pay for the services to provide the information to the entities to work. I think that's really important in terms of how we respond. There's the development of the no. Now this is where the question of debts assets becomes really important. So the development of the no worse off funding. So remember, there's two types of funding: there's better off funding, and there's the no worse off funding. Okay, so the no worse off. So government has said that no balance sheet or no council should be no worse off because of these good stuff. So that's a really important line in the sand. And so, but they haven't done, well, that's not true. They're in the transition unit, they're starting the work on what constitutes debt, what are the assets, which will go to the question of what is the asset, the pipe, or is it the land underneath the pipe, or those types of things. So we would expect to be starting to see some of that work in the next 90 days. And similarly, the funding for transition costs. So our stance so far is show us the money, and then we'll help but show us the money. Now the next.
Could I ask a question there, Harry? If they're saying that we're no worse off methodology or funding, then basically we've got an asset that we won't have anymore. So the only way we can be no worse off is if we invest that money.
We're paid for it.
No, so because the debt goes, so there's no reimbursement for the taking of the assets. There's no.
I understand all that.
Yeah. So the debt for the assets transfers as well. So the main thing in this is things like stranded assets. So if it's half a staff member, for instance, all those types, so it's a wide range of people, capability. If you take, for instance, a small council like us, where you might have had a general manager who looks after roading, to part of that role goes, but you don't take away the whole role.
No.
It literally is that kind of.
Oh, so that funding's for that, it's not replacing what we've got.
No.
Okay.
Well, Pam,
I was thinking was that all those assets are going, and if we want our book to look the same, then all that money needs to just sit there so that we've got that.
I would be a little bit more cynical and say if you take away 20% of your assets and 20% of your responsibilities, or 25%, what's the value that you have left? And then, funnily enough, there seems to be a representational review going on at exactly the same time. Yeah. And I would suggest that we're not looking at that this council won't be worse off because it probably won't exist.
Anyway, moving on.
Hopefully we'll still exist.
Okay, so
I don't know, am I reading this wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, I am.
So the next thing is the better off funding. So the government has promised 2 tranches of funding to local government. And this is to support, not necessarily water, this is for the councils at their own, it doesn't include water, it doesn't actually include, not strong rates, but it doesn't, it's very broad ranging. So this is for councils to look at social wellbeing, community development, adaptation to climate change, to be thinking about the broader context, because the government is the main context here is that we've got the water's going out, and this is to help government, local government, to think about what could the future of local government be. So it's to build and start thinking about what are the services you would like to play to people of the community in terms of wellbeing, housing, those types of things. So that's essentially the rationale for the better off funding, is to start fund councils to start thinking about how you turn off from being a water provider to what does the new world look like. Of course, that's uncertain because we don't know what the future of local government is actually going to be. But what we do know is what if the government had its intention, it would be switching up the well-being, the community well-being side of things. That fourth well-being that was tuned by national when it took out the four well-beings out of And so that's very much the signal. Now, so this comes in two tranches. You've got, we would have 1.75 million. And the first tranche is 25% of the amount that we do have available, which I think is about 7.5 million in total. And that's available should council want to go into the space now. The worrying thing when we talked about it last time was the tags that would be attached to that. The biggest one was, were we signing up to saying, we're buying into the government reforms? The messaging from the minister on record, and I suspect we'll get it in writing, is that it is not, councils can take a position that's contrary to the reforms, and it doesn't impact your ability to use.
Get off funding.
Should we use the government's term for the money, or should we use the Auditor General's term for the money?
Alistair, you've been provocative now.
Yeah. Couldn't someone remind me of what the word was?
Okay, so
I think it was a bribe, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the technical difficulty here is that they would not want to use this funding for lifting too much operational funding if there's no guarantee of a funding stream into the future. And that the issue with the second tranche of rates, so second tranche is that it's not available to local government until the 1st of July 2024 because it is coming as a debt, as funding from the entity itself. Yeah. So it's a debt raised against the entity that then could be used to fund the second tranche of things. This is better off funding. You've got an indicative timeline here, but the intention is looking at introducing legislation around July into the House. It is, I know it has been substantially drafted. And the reason I say that is that if you read the cabinet paper that was presented, under, you call it secrecy or whatever it is, the draft, what we call exposure draft, which is the draft legislation, was presented to the steering group. And so the cabinet paper goes through, we are going to amend the legislation to include this recommendation, and this is what the wording will look like. So, so the legislation has been and is being drafted and checked as we speak. So as far as we are aware, there shouldn't be any impediment to the government putting the legislation into the select committee process in the timeline that they're indicating. So the challenges and risks, and there are many of them. So the biggest one is trying to keep your infrastructure and your staff running. As a headline, Wellington Water are currently facing a 20% staffing turnover. People are leaving for the transition units, etc. So, the operational risk is, for instance, imagine if we lost 3 of our plant operators. They don't grow on trees. So keeping supporting Wellington Water as an employer to be able to keep the lights on is actually something we need to be mindful of. So there's a risk to the council.
So maybe it is a good idea that we take stuff back. I'm just saying there's a substantial risk to Wellington Water of not having the staff that are required to operate some of the basic services that are actually working, like our plant operations and our wastewater plants and those types of things. And the reasons here, the lack of funding resources to support us to do the work, as Alistair said, the lack of a clear timeline and requirements, the legislation, the detail, and the other side is the public understanding is still very low. There's a lot of misinformation still floating around, hearing and stuff, and you can see the debate going around those things. So, look, that's a summary of all the information we have to date. And it's important this is recorded, and we'll be putting this up on our website so the public
are aware of what is available and to our own Stellar folders.
Yep.
So that councils have access to it.
Yeah, Brenda.
A very comprehensive report, thank you very much, Mr Messenger. But one thing that kind of like springs to mind is how do we effectively take our communities through this journey? The point that Alistair was saying that we're not being very communicative, even though we're getting very scant information. I think it really is important to take our communities through this. My other concern is that, you know, we purchased some land for a water solution, and if this kicks off, we're going to lose all that land. And I think that's very disheartening, because that land, although it might not be suitable for a water solution, is still land that could be effectively used for something else, or a change of scope for the use of that land. So I'm just a bit wary about where that's going.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, all of our, first of all, the fundamental question is the transfer of asset the asset behind, or is it the land?
Yeah.
And we don't know that.
Well, lucky enough, we've got no pipes here, so we can have the land back.
But just to give you a context of how this has been managed in other areas. So, for instance, when they did the national grid and the electricity, the lines, there was no ownership by Transpower of the land underneath the lines. Right, they didn't own it. And so, you know, they had problems with trying to get access to fix things and all that. They dealt with it by actually creating a national environmental standard under the RMA that provided access to the resource. So it depends on the nature of the problem is. And so if the issue is pump station, that's slightly different to that big blocks of land for irrigation. So yeah, look, it's going to be.
And we are working on that. So, and Bryce is working on that with regards to land that we have purchased for water assets that are not being used for water assets or not able to be used, that we are safeguarding ourselves in that area, and how we do that within what the proposed legislation is.
I suppose the other one is Payne Farm, because that's an even more peculiar one.
And that,
all of
yeah,
our
that's really,
yeah, all of our land irrigations has an encumbrance in one form. You know, whether it's Greytown or the lighting the leases we've got, whether it's the Payne Farm, which is actually separately, it's a separate statute. Yeah. So we are mindful of that. The other thing is that from day one, the government said we are going to manage consultation with the and consultation with the public, and you know there's a cost associated with consultation that they're not going to fund. And they live and dying by their actions. So yes, we do need to inform our public, but their stated role is it's our role to do that, whether we agree with it or not. Yeah.
And Harry, can I ask you a question? You're in contact with other CEs all the time on this. I guess the questions we're asked are no different to theirs. And, you know, as time goes on, we'll probably start getting some answers that we need. I mean, Alistair's saying that we need to put a stated position. I don't want to fight a war that I'm never going to win. But we just got to get ourselves in a position that if we are forced to go in, we go in at the best advantage for our ratepayers that we can. And the information that we get from you via the discussions with other CEs is very important on how we do that.
Which is, and that's why, I mean, this summary that was given you, these overheads, they are the same information that's been presented for some regional CEs and so forth. So this, we're all seeing the same. Believe me, the amount of meetings, Zoom meetings.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's just the ones that it's just horrific.
There'll be questions here that no one's asked yet. But we'll only ask them as things evolve.
Look, and I haven't remember if you go back, I haven't even highlighted it. Under when they set up the steering group on this particular topic, there were two other steering groups. One is about rural water supplies, and the other was about in place with the planning stuff that's going on the RMA. So there's we haven't seen the economic regulator, and that's going to operate You've got Tamati ROI who, they have a separate statute. Yes, they're the regulator of the entities, but they stand aside by that very definition. And so they've been doing a slew of standards that will apply to.
Which we still haven't seen yet.
No, we have.
It was in some of the.
I've sent them all out to you. But you actually have to be a microbiologist.
I know.
To understand, and actually understand the actual specificity.
I started.
Standard,
How long before we get the law on that?
That work.
Only on
So we
that.
need to-
Close to the end of April,
Yeah.
it's not there yet.
Could I ask a question? Harry?
Harry, when you put the things, like you're going to put some of those papers and things on the website for the people, could we also have a piece of that goes in front of it that says what we know, what we don't know, sort of style. So we know that we're going to get this money, but we don't know what they're going to take in the way of assets for it, and and things like that. We know what the timeline is, that sort of thing. So there's lots of things that we can put together for what we know and what we don't know, so that we're not actually saying what our opinion is of it, but we're giving the public the factual information that they need to know, that they don't have the ability to troll through stuff to get. And I think it's very important that we put those facts up if we're going to put documents up.
Yeah, I'll do my best, but honestly, I might just spend a whole.
And they'll change it.
Yeah, I know, but this is
That's my very concern here, and you and Alex have both said that the government is responsible for the consultation with the public.
Yes.
Right? Throughout this whole process, I know DIA has trumpeted that they've met with every iwi and up around the country. I am unaware, now you correct me if I'm wrong, but has there been a single meeting with DIA in South Wairarapa with members of the public?
no.
Has there been a single meeting in the Wairarapa with members of the public? And when I look at the timeframe, their way of consultation is select committee process. Well, that's not consultation. That's not engaging with the community. And so again, I come back to my point. We have to actually register and say, this is not good enough. Where are we going to be able to do that? We have to represent our views and say, you said you would consult with the public. You are not consulting with the public. Select committee process for a bill that's already introduced in Parliament with a minister who has said this is going ahead regardless is not consultation.
What we've got to do, and I'm going to go back to what Jeppy said, is what we are doing has to be with the best interest of our ratepayer and to get the best result for our ratepayer. And with the 33 councils and one mayor in particular, standing up screaming is not doing him or his ratepayers any.
I'm not suggesting we stand up and do that. What I'm suggesting is we say to these people there, Manaia Mahuta, who has said, I don't care, this is going ahead. But we go back to her and say, you said you would consult. You are not consulting. You have not had a single meeting with our public.
I have been saying, as it's been in the paper, saying there has been no consultation with iwi, and the DIA said, yes, there has, but then Dougal List went back and said, actually, I agree, there has not been.
Yeah, but I would like a letter from our council going out on this saying, our council says this, you are the mayor, you are one voice. We need to speak as a voice for our people and say, our council is not satisfied with the process you have followed.
But apart from that, I think that we have a responsibility to put out to our public what we know.
And what the information is.
And in a factual, unbiased, know how we stand on this or anything.
We've got this Dougal List's presentation. Do we put that front and foremost on our web page at the moment?
That's why I've been regularly reporting to you on this, so that we can keep that information in the public.
Because that's a very good overview of exactly what's going on.
It is.
It is going to raise some questions from it within our community, but this is what we know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Is it possible, Harry, to distill down, just going back to what Pam said, what we know and what we don't know, financial implications? still too much information to make.
Don't have anything yet.
And rural, and
Not enough information to make.
How
enough.
But this is
do
the
this
information we have.
situation. Do you want me to do a state in play, distribute to everyone for comment in addition? And that becomes the cover letter for this on our webpage. What we know, what we don't know, what our concerns are.
Yeah, but we're not driving these
No.
reforms. We're only getting piecemeal information at a
So
time,
not making
not
a
driving them.
stand, but we're certainly raising our concern or our.
Oh,
That's
I
all we
wouldn't
can
even-
do. When the information comes through, the only time we've got an opportunity to comment is once we've been informed about what that.
So would you like me to do that?
Yes,
Distribute to
absolutely.
everyone,
Yeah.
and then Alistair, Sam, Jeppy, you can put the comments in there, and we have a statement by council.
But I think the councillors around the table would agree that the information is scanned and that we're no better off, we're no far forward than the general public.
But
Exactly.
less, so, sorry, the general public just needs to have what we have.
Yep.
And I think that's what I absolutely agree with councillor Colenso, that this information that you've presented, at least it's got some like information there. I think people will be able to read that and then take from that information the same way we are, form their opinions, and then they will report and let us know. Okay, I don't feel myself, I'm certainly not going to make a statement here until we hear from our public, until we hear from the people who I represent on where they would like me to go with this. So that's just that, and that's just me. Obviously, so but I would like them to have the same information that we have, that they have the chance to take the time to go over as well.
And that's, very good. And that's exactly why I'm putting this.
And with your covering letter.
But just
It won't be a letter, it'll just be simply a little letter to say, here's the presentation, here's the. Try to think in summary.
all we can do is give a summative information and refer people to the underlying documents. In
Yes,
this paper alone, there are 150 recommendations that can be put into, and that does not include economic regulation, doesn't include the tracking standard. You know.
but I don't want,
So we're not going to.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
and I don't want to start with any personal concerns I have, because I don't want to sway the public from reading this document first and then.
Yeah.
You're right, and that goes back to
What goes to on from just.
Because-
We're up to 2.2, do we want to adjourn, have lunch and then come back to finish yours?
I think this is the reason is, so the reason is just a very quick, just update to where things are going. So look,
Take the rest as read.
well, no, I've drawn to it. So the setting of speed limits, because we've undertaken to do a speed review. So this is actually helpful. So this is something local government has actually been arguing for a long time, which is to have a much easier process for setting and changing and varying our own speed limits. It doesn't require a bylaw process, right? And so the speed management rule, so that's the rule that governs how speeds are set in New Zealand, has been amended, and it basically allows essentially a plan to be developed, and that plan, and you can literally simply, once you've got that plan, you're saying these are the speed, at the simplest, if you just take actually what you've got, just put it up as a plan, you need to amend it, so we've said here. And then if you want to change one road, what you do is amend the plan. And it's a really easy process, as opposed to having to go out for a bylaw to change Underhill Road to do. And the bylaw making process has actually been really fraught in New Zealand, because at a technical level, a number of councils did not follow a proper bylaw making process, and that actually resulted in the police having to go back and refund infringements that were issued on breaches of speed.
Oh dear, they never gave me any money.
And simply because the bylaw process wasn't followed correctly. You know, people tried to do it quickly by resolution, and that wasn't what they were supposed to do. So, so this is a good thing. It doesn't, so I think it's really important to draw your attention to it, but we'll come back to you with more detail, and especially to our group that has been working on that kind of thing. So I just want to know that.
Excuse me, Harry, could Alistair and I talk with you and Tim, because we need to know
Yes.
how that affects us, because we're on that speed review committee and we're just, just get an understanding. So that'd be really good. Thank you.
So the setting of speed, is that set by councillors or is it confirmed by councillors at the council?
Councillors.
Would be a recommendation from officers, I would think.
Great.
Yep, absolutely.
And bear in mind that if NZTA doesn't like it, they can change it.
Over
With
district.
If you're, I mean, like for instance, we suddenly said we're going to make our roads 110.
Yeah.
You can't do that. So it's, yeah, it has to be. When we said outside school, we're going to make it 100K. So
Yeah, no.
that's the kind of level that it's, look, and the last one is the future of local government. So the time for submissions on the future of local government concludes as of 1 July. Okay, so which is a bit tricky because you can't actually, so that's when they'll pull together the report the councils can then respond to, essentially. Okay? So right now, other than the very high level principle work that's been done, there is not detail here at all. And so, but once you've actually got the document, then we'll be in a sense to actually make some intelligent commentary about where that's heading. We just don't know. Right now, there's been information gathering from 67 councils, everyone has a view, that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to just let you know that.
Any questions on that?
Amanda was going to say something.
90 minutes public consultation at the moment, so anyone can make a submission.
Yeah.
Great.
We're okay with that?
Yep.
Cool. Now, I'm just gonna,
That concludes my report.
thank you very much. Mr.
Thank you.
Wilson.
Thank you very much, Harry.
It was really useful. If everyone's okay to item G, sorry, item F,
yours?
the appointments
Oh.
report, because we have Lucy here to give us an overview from Cobblestone. So do we have a mover to receive the report? Thanks, Brenda. Seconded, Jimmy. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against. Lucy, welcome. I do apologise for the paper line.
That's all right. Hello. It was, this isn't as sexy as Pipes and Crow. It's got its own charm. Yes, I'm going to take the report that I've sent through as read, but really what I wanted to draw your attention to was what's coming up, which is currently we're just reviewing our strategic plan and goals. It's a really significant document for us, and I've got to say that under the leadership of Chris Hume, our current chair, who designed and helped develop the current strategic plan, which comes to an end this year. We've been really, I think our governance is very strong at the museum currently, and we have a really clear sense of what it is we want to do, what we're and we're trying to project into the future what else we need to do as a significant asset in not just Greytown but Wairarapa in general, and what kind of relationships do we need to be building, and what kind of work do we need to be formulating in order to be a really strong asset. So I want to give you the opportunity to engage with us if you would like to, if you've got any ideas, even if you just want to tell us if you've been to Cobblestones and you've enjoyed it and what you enjoyed. It's really useful feedback for us. We have been really thinking about how we make ourselves more relevant in the future, or continue to be relevant. And that has included engaging Jen Craddock, who is an independent museums consultant based in Carterton, and she is incredible. She's worked at Te Papa, and she's really helped us raise our sights and really think about the less is more philosophy, as opposed to like 58 sewing machines and how many hand hoes do you really need to kind of tell the story about a hand hoe. So she's currently working on our red shed and our stables, and has really helped just kind of give us the language and the capacity and the capability to think very seriously and in a business-like way about our museum and its assets. If you would like to engage with us, that would be fantastic. Just drop me a line. I also want to say I've met with Steve this morning, your incredible community development officer, and we're going to embark on just a continued conversation, try and check in with each other every 2 months to see how we can really make the relationship between the museum and the council really sing. I was only thinking while I was with Steve, it just occurred to me, we run a museum, like that's pretty impressive. You know, the community runs a museum, and so perhaps in that simple phrase is really all the expertise that the board and the volunteers and the Friends of Cobblestones represents. You know, I really know very little about running a museum, but fortunately I'm not required to. I'm really on the board to help with this kind of strategic thinking and really help massage the relationship between the museum and the community. But we have some incredible talent and expertise, and I think what I'd really like to do while I'm on the board is really elevate, you know, that expertise and make people realise what an incredible thing it is to have such a popular and well-loved museum on our doorstep. And so, yes, I don't know what that will mean for the future, but I guess that's what strategic planning is all about.
Cool. I'll start the questions.
Yes, thank you.
So 1,698 visitors in the first third.
Yes.
The year, it's not bad.
It's not bad, given the challenges that we've had, and also I think we've all been suffering from pandemic fatigue and wondering, is it safe to go out? I think I'd rather watch another box set on Netflix. So, you know, we are battling that kind of fatigue, but I think the border's opening up in the sense that, you know, more people with exotic accents are coming through our shores. We hope to see those numbers run.
And financial security of Cobblestones, how's that looking there?
Well, obviously, we've got some strategic challenges in that space. So there's an ongoing kind of conversation with the Greytown Trustlands Trust. And I'm not an expert in that area, but I just know that that is causing some kind of little ripples of unease, and we're really conscious that we need to keep working on that relationship. But I think as a board, we've always been very successful at raising funds. And what we'd like to do is to become more and more self-sufficient. And so we're really giving some thought as to what does that mean? How can we make our assets really kind of work for us in that sense? And so we're just kind of looking outside of ourselves and seeing what else goes on around the country. But obviously, the funding that you guys provide is absolutely integral. But we really want you to feel proud of the funding that you give and to see, you know, what we can achieve with that money. Yeah.
Cool. Part of your strategy was to look at quite a large renovation of the stable block.
Yes.
And is that, are you cautious about going ahead while you're trying to sort out the land situation?
Yes. So I guess strategically that is definitely on the cards. Obviously, we have to kind of get some other ducks in the row. But Jane Craddock's involvement has really helped us understand what that will look like once we can actually get down and do the money. Obviously, the ongoing maintenance of the building still continues. That's all, you know, business as usual stuff is continuing. We're conscious that some of our volunteers and some of our supporters in the community may be a bit frustrated that we haven't been able to get on with some of the bigger works. But I hope that people understand that COVID and all the other things have been a bit of a challenge. But we are, I think, in terms of governance, I've been so impressed by the board. We really understand how to stick to our governance knitting, and part of that job is to make sure that we have a really rock solid strategic kind of vision, and we will implement that as and when you know, certainty in funds and COVID allows.
Excellent. Colin, you have your hand up there?
Yeah, just a quick question for you, Your Worship. Do we have an appointee on the board of Cobblestones? Business you are. Sitting on the board side.
Yes,
but you are our council representative. Thank you.
Yeah, Lucy, thanks. I speak to Chris regularly, and one of the challenges she always raises is bringing the next generation in. How's that getting? And I know she was thinking about some things. She keeps saying, well, I come on, I'm going, well, it's not really my thing, but
yeah.
Sort of how are you getting on with it?
Well, it is a real challenge. Apparently, you know, I'm considered a young person on the board, so I'm sticking around. And I'm hopeful, and I hope Becky doesn't mind me saying this, but Becky Bateman has also said that she'd be interested in helping us, and I think that would be an incredible asset. Obviously, I can't force her to come on the board, but I really hope that we don't do anything to put her off. We are, going forward, we will really need to focus on our volunteer body. What makes somebody want to volunteer, and how can we tap into that kind of younger lifeblood that we've got going on in our community? One message that I've been hearing is volunteers don't like being given too much to do, and absolutely, like, you know, if I'm going to volunteer, I want one job, and I want to know I can succeed at one job. So we'll be looking at how we can develop a bit of a volunteer strategy to make sure that we've always got the people around us, and we don't exhaust our volunteers. I'm really conscious that everybody on the board and the volunteers work so hard, and that will take its toll, and already has. And people have got other things they'd like to do in their lives. You know, we can't expect cobblestones to be front and centre. So absolutely, and I would encourage, if you know anybody out there who's got a few hours to spare and would like to give back to the community, then poke them our way, because we would love to. We'd love to.
Well, he's standing out from the council.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
I've got a camel
As long as we don't do any, you know, ACC claim injuries, then I think we're all good.
No, I think it's great.
He'll put low voltage batteries in.
Lucy, as you were speaking then, just a thought sprung into my mind. Have you actually taken your vitality to Kuranui College? Because the students there are so wanting and doing that sort of for their Duke of Edinburgh awards and things like that, wanting to do that.
Yes, no, we do. Chris has been working really hard to try and get a relationship going with Kuranui. It's kind of fallen on deaf ears, probably for a number of reasons. It's been such a horrible couple of years. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to go out to the schools and identify what is it that they're doing that we can help with, and not try and invent something new. I'm really keen on the phrase, I want to work smarter, not harder. We're all working hard enough. So how can what we do, how can the assets that we have, how can the things, the kind of taonga that we hold be useful to people in the community? So absolutely, I think, Pam, you've kind of really hit upon the message that we need to be taking, which is, what are you doing? How can we help?
Lee, you had a question?
Oh, just a quick question. You've lowered the age of board, which is fantastic, and your enthusiasm is brilliant. So I was Chris shared with me the concept designs for stable dogs, which just looked incredible, they're just fantastic, and all the interpretation. When would you be in a position to share that with councillors? Because I think it'd be, look, it's just a PDF and in the mock-ups, but it'd be lovely to, if you
Oh, absolutely. We have a wrap-up meeting with Jen Craddock next Friday.
Yeah.
And so then we'll be in a position to kind of package that all up and put it on our website. So if you don't mind me emailing you with that link when it comes. And then at the next meeting, I could come along and perhaps, you know, do a bit more of a deep dive. Absolutely. Yeah. It's something to be really proud of. I think what I'm really proud of Cobblestones doing, and I hope this comes across in the right way, is we do fundraise in order that we do things really well. And we're not scared of getting the expertise in and making sure that we have the funds available to pay for that expertise, to make sure that we're relevant and we're doing things to a high quality. And I think that's what the engagement of Jen Craddock has really done. It shows you that, in fact, we couldn't have done what Jen has helped us to do. And that does need some investment. And so, you know, when we fundraise, we're thinking about that. What do we need to spend? What do we need to fundraise in order to spend to keep us relevant and professional, and an asset that's really, you know, worth the kind of gold standard marks that we get on TripAdvisor?
Cool. Alistair.
Lucy, the other one, Greycoat Community Board, obviously the proposal of moving the information centre to.
Yes.
So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yes. Well, look, I'm probably not the expert in this space, or only to say that I think it would be a tremendous idea. I think currently my personal view is that our building, the front part of our building, isn't working hard enough for us. And that if we could help combine some assets, existing assets in the town, and consolidate some of those things, that would be great. There's no doubt that we get footfall coming through our doors, and I would love to see some leaflets on the wall. So all I can say is that I know that the board is 100% behind the idea. We've got a bit of HR to think through at the moment. I don't want to preempt anything, but we do have some opportunities in that space that I think have happened really serendipitously with this idea around the eyesight stuff. So
We'll look forward to a report from the community board on that. Yeah, because that's very much within the remit.
yes,
Yeah.
but
Last question?
Last question. Can I get you to turn on your head your suggestion about sending that PDF out? Why don't we as a council, after one of our council meetings on a Wednesday, come to you and you present it at Cobblestones?
you're in. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, ma'am. You just committed us to.
I am so pleased that I'm pleasing you.
But I mean, could I invite you to potentially have your council meeting?
No, we have, unfortunately not.
Okay,
Sorry, Lucy.
We need this technology
okay,
for live streaming.
all right.
But good, but certainly we could either do it after a council meeting, or you could just set a date. And just say we have a couple of 3 o'clock on this.
Well, I was thinking it was on a Wednesday, basically.
Yeah, let's do that. Great idea.
I will drive a minibus.
Lucy, thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you. Bye. Good luck with your road. Thank you.
I think we'll adjourn for lunch and then come back to the mayor's report and the last items. Cool.
Sounds like it's.
Cool.